wouldn't it be great if we figured out that first and foremost, not everybody wants or needs to go to college.
Agreed.
And if we have a situation to where right now in 2023, trade workers are making more than professionals, maybe, just maybe, we ought to have more options available to our high schoolers to certification programs.
Okay. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Malcolm. Malcolm Locks everywhere. You guys know the vibes. Listen, starting a new podcast, The Principal Protocol. It's a podcast about business, technology, entrepreneurship, tech, and we're going to throw some politics in there. Why? Because it is political season, and you guys need to know who you're going to be potentially voting for. And I have the lovely Miss Donyale Hall today. How are you today?
I'm blessed by the best, Malcolm. How are you? I'm so happy to be with you this evening.
And I appreciate you giving me some of your time. I know we had a real good conversation a few weeks ago, and I wanted to 100% follow up on what it was that we talked about and get you on my platform. You are the very first. So you gotta set the tone. You gotta set the tone. So first and foremost, let's get this started off. Who are you? Who is Miss Hall? Let the people know who you are.
Well, for starters, I'm no stranger to politics. I've run for a few offices, and the most recent statewide run I've had was for lieutenant governor back in 2020. It was a fabulous time going up and down the state of Delaware, just meeting our neighbors, Malcolm, talking to people about what their issues are, talking about what might be fixes for what these issues are, how we can deal with Delaware issues on a municipal, local, state, and even federal level. So I'm excited to be back in the race this cycle. I'm running for U.S. Congress. Lisa Blunt Rochester has indicated that she is going to leave that seat to pursue Senator Carper's seat. And so that leaves a vacancy in our sole at-large House of Representatives seat here in Delaware. I feel that I am very uniquely qualified for that seat because, again, most people who know me know I have boots on the ground, literally. So I'm a small business owner. I have a general contracting company. If you were to see me out in everyday walk of life, you'll see me in some steel toe boots, some jeans, a hoodie, one of these hats with my hair pulled back and no makeup. So I'm either covered in paint, drywall, dust, or grass on a regular basis. So I'm a hardworking woman. I am a mother of 10 beautiful children. If nobody else remembers me for anything else, they remember me for my fun fact. 8 of those are adults, and I've got one that's got 1 foot in the door and 1 foot out. He's a senior at DSU. He'll be graduating this year. And I have 2 full-timers in the house. One's 6th grade and one's 8th grade. So, you remember those middle school years. They were interesting and challenging. And I think that over 30 years of raising kids for me has really given me a strong understanding of what's going on in our education system. What's
a huge topic. Education is a huge topic.
Absolutely. And, we'll get a little further down into that rabbit hole when we get there. But education is a huge topic here because we are doing so woefully at the bottom of the nation in our education achievements here. So we'll talk more of course, about that. And of course, I'm a veteran. So you see the patriotism here running on my hat. We're coming up on Veterans Day, 3 generations of family military service. In my family, my dad was stationed at Dover Air Force Base in 1973.
Oh, wow.
I was the ripe old age of 3 when I moved here. So I've been educated here. I couldn't be more homegrown if I'd actually been born here. So I graduated from Caesar Rodney High School in '87. 5 of my children are CR grads. I have 3 that went through the early college high school program at Del State, and 2 are middle schoolers in the CR school district. So, you know, like I said, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of our education system. Two of my sons are carrying on the family legacy of service. I served in support of Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm in the early 90s. One of my sons just recently got out of the Air Force. He was injured in his deployment to Jordan. And so, you know, things that are going on in our VA system are very near and dear to my heart, because he's 21 years old and he's got 6 bad discs in his back. So, you know, we have a situation to where we have to have a level of advocacy for our men and women who have served our country. And, you know, it's a shame that in a lot of instances, they're afterthought. And one of my sons is active duty Navy, and he's currently in Japan. So he has an aircraft carrier that's, you know, outside of Korea right now. So, you know, I have a keen understanding of things that are going on both on foreign and domestic soil here in Delaware, you know, with our needs being unmet here. And so that's what my urgency is to run, is because I really feel that over the years, I wear several hats within marginalized communities. Those are simply the communities that have been overlooked and forgotten. And I think that when we have an absence of someone who can speak our truth to power, we lose all the way around. So I believe that it's time that we get rid of some of these career politicians and put men and women in office that really understand what we go through here with our boots on the ground.
That you've literally had a ton of experiences that you've just listed down to me. How has those experiences really shaped your career in politics and what you want to do for the state of Delaware moving forward?
Well, I haven't ever served in elected office. And so it would be a first time for me to be in elected office. I believe that when we look at the type of government that we have, we are a representative democracy. And so that equates to a republic. That's where people are elected to be representative of our voice. My pressing question to most of the elected officials is, how can you represent me if you don't know who I am? I can honestly say that I can count the amount of candidates that have ever bothered to don my doorstep on one hand. And I've been living in my home now for 23 years. That's a lot of years to have only seen 2 politicians that would come to the door and say, how are you in your community? You know, I think about all of the things that politicians talk about with violence and crime in communities. I remember growing up in the neighborhood right across the street from where I currently live. And I remember that community being upper middle class families, with the current community that I live in now being maybe slightly above that socioeconomically. And so when I look around, I see disengaged youth walking up and down the street. I see the Boys and Girls Club, which is down the street and around the corner, that's cost prohibitive to some of the youth that could benefit from the programs. And I see us just constantly missing the mark. I mean, my neighbors are finding more lucrative opportunities in our streets than viable opportunities to good employment. And that begs the question as to why. Why are we missing the mark so grossly? And I think it's because we have a complete and total absence of the folks that could speak our truths to power, bring the problem to light, bring a solution, and be able to execute a strategic plan on how to change the narrative. So again, I think that my background, I have a master's degree in business with a concentration in finance. I'm a small business owner. I'm a mom of a tribe of children that have went through the education system. And I'm a small business owner that has tried to figure out how to make sure those that, you know, I employ are paid and I can still pay my bills. So, you know, these are important questions that we need to have answered by people who bring that set of skills to the table to find solutions.
So I want to take a small step back. So a lot of people are so hyper fixated on, you know, the Donald Trump, the Joe Biden, right? That whole conversation, whereas there's a lot of opportunity to be involved on the state and local level, right? For your particular seat that you're running for, tell the people exactly what does that seat do on a day-to-day basis, and why is it important for you as a Black woman to be in that seat?
Well, currently we have a Black woman in that seat. And so I would like to have a opportunity to continue to carry on that legacy and that capacity. Certainly, I think that as Black women, our plight sometimes is not always vocalized. And I think that I would certainly not be a quiet person. And I would have no trouble, again, articulating my particular truth to power. So we have things that are unique to our individual experiences. And for that reason, it is important that we have voices that span a whole range of different backgrounds. So, you know, we've got to have people of color. We've got to have a good mix of men and women. We have to have a good mix of all types of backgrounds. So, you know, the more that we have represented at the table, I think we get a better vantage point of those things. And if we look at, you know, just some of the things that are going on over in Washington, D.C. in our House of Representatives right now, you know, more than ever, I think that it's time for us to put aside partisan rhetoric, divisive rhetoric, and be able to understand that not only people here in our country are looking at us, we have foreign nations that are looking at us, and to see the disarray that we have inside of our DC legislature is embarrassing, quite frankly. And as someone who has served this country in a military capacity, I often wonder, you know, does that put us in a precarious situation where people are doubting even, you know, our military strength as a nation just because of all of the mayhem that we have going on in our own nation's capital. So I think, you know, it's time that we have people who are able to put aside partisan issues, partisan rhetoric, and just the divisive nature of that, figure out how we can find some common ground issues and find common ground solutions for those issues.
So that leads me right into some of my next questions. Whereas you spoke about you being a small business owner, and there's a lot of difficulties specifically with what you do. There's a lot of difficulties around that, and we know small businesses have just faced so many significant challenges, especially since COVID. How would you, especially the way how Delaware is set up economically, right? What will some of the work that you'll be doing in order to ensure their survival moving forward into 2024, 2025 and beyond?
Thank you for that very important question. So prior to becoming a small business owner, I used to work for the U.S. Department of Labor for Veterans Employment and Training Services. And in that role, I got an opportunity to see just how much the federal government impacts, you know, business, even in the state of Delaware. So in that particular role, there are federal dollars that come into Delaware that service our veterans outreach programs. And in Delaware, in order for that money to be replenished, there's a quarterly reporting system that's put in place that allows for Delaware veteran outreach programs to remain funded. And so, I think I looked at how just the money tracks in that particular space. And I thought to myself, we have some things like SBA funds that can come into different areas because they're identified as zones that may have low participation rate by, say, minorities or disabled veteran-owned businesses. And so, there's different things that are unique to our census tract here in Delaware that puts us in a position that if we have people in places of decision-making and authority to bring some of those pockets of resources into the state, we can see where we can see significant difference in Delaware, on Delaware soil, because we can be partakers of different pots of money that could be brought into our state. But there has to be someone who has that acumen and that desire to want to make sure that we put those resources in the hands of the people who need them most. And I think that, again, my background speaks a lot to that. I've seen things where there's supposed to be, and I'm going to use this term loosely, set-asides for different types of entities where if you check some boxes like you are a ethnic or gender minority owned business, if you are a disabled owned business, and I've been asking this question for probably about the last 10 years, Malcolm, so I know what I'm speaking on here. And my biggest question was, well, I meet the criteria for all of these different things. Why is it that I'm not being able to take advantage of, these particular set-asides that are supposed to be there for a disabled veteran-owned business? Why is it that I'm struggling so much to have to compete against someone else, for that same opportunity? And so I think that when we get to a place where not only do we know about the resources, but we put them in plain sight and make them accessible, that's when we'll start to see the narrative shift. And we'll be able to see places like Delaware, who've seen no economic growth for the past 3 decades, be able to move forward. And when I think about that piece of it, we know that Delaware has one of the most lucrative incorporation statuses in the country. And so if you're incorporating your business in Delaware, we need to see you bring a home office here. And in order for us to see those businesses start bringing their businesses to Delaware and contributing, to our employment structure here, we've got to do some things that address some of the shortfalls, like education. So I've heard in the conversation that because we're doing so low in our education here, that people don't want to bring their companies here because they have children and they have families. So why am I going to bring my company to a state where I don't think that my child's education needs are going to be adequately met? Why am I going to bring my company where I'm going to ask for other people to come in and take these jobs? How am I going to attract the talent that I want to attract to Delaware if the achievement is low? If I'm in manufacturing and I'm thinking about maybe bringing, my manufacturing company to Delaware. I mean, this is a great place where we're on the 95 corridor, we have the ports, but if our costs for energy here in the state of Delaware are far exceeding our neighboring states, then what we're doing is we're incentivizing those companies to go elsewhere instead of bringing those valuable jobs that we really need here to Delaware.
Because workforce development is such a huge buzzword right now in Delaware, and I'm glad that you're tying all that in. So further elaborate on why is workforce development such a buzzword, and why do you feel like those industries aren't really parking in Delaware the way that they're supposed to be parking?
Well, workforce development, if you start to really walk it back, if you think about how alarming, the increase and the rise in crime has been throughout the years, there's a direct correlation between crime and poverty, Malcolm. And so if you're thinking in terms of workforce development, there's a couple of different prongs and approaches that you can kind of look at with that conversation. First, we have our schools, which are feeders to our workforce, right? And so if you just kind of take a look around the state and the lay of the land for education, what year did you graduate?
From high school?
Yes.
2004.
2004. Okay, I graduated in 1987. So I'm gonna date myself. I'm 53, right?
I was born in 1986.
All right, I've got kids your age, but we won't go there. Anyway, so when you were going through school, did you find that there was a push more towards college or to trades, or did you have a good
100% toward college? 100%.
College.
It was either college or what you gonna do with yourself?
Nothing. And that's my point. Some people have felt over the years, and I have been feeling that way much myself as a mom, that we took a course correction somewhere between when I graduated and when you graduated that put the emphasis on college. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but let's take a look at what we have now. We've got a bunch of people who are coming out of college. Did you get your degree?
Yeah, I did. I got my degree in chemistry.
Okay.
What's up, guys? Are you into gaming content? Are you into business or entrepreneurial content? Maybe you just really love tech and you want to talk about that too. Well, guess what? You found the right place. It's your boy Malcolm. Malcolm Locks Everywhere. You know the vibes. If you want to know more about gaming, entrepreneurship, business, or tech, you came to the right place. So make sure you guys follow me, Malcolm Locks Everywhere, for all your gaming, business, entrepreneurial, and tech information that'll really feed your soul.
Are you working in that industry?
I am not, in no way, shape, or form.
Why wouldn't you work in that field?
I was before, prior to, but now, 100% entrepreneur. So that's why I'm not in that industry, but I was though.
Okay. So how long did you work in the industry?
I worked in the industry after graduation for maybe about 7 years after I had graduated from college. So maybe about 20, I'm lying, not 7 years, maybe about 4 actually, to about 2013-ish. I kind of made a shift after, I graduated from college in like 2013. I kind of like made a shift into like the whole technology thing.
The reason why I'm asking is because most people that are coming out of college don't go into their chosen field. That's one. Now you did. Now my question to you would be, was your salary compensatory in such a way that it allowed you to leverage your occupation, your employment, to be able to address any student loan debt? Do you have any student loan debt?
Yeah, I got a ton.
A ton. How about that? How's that affecting your credit? How's that affecting your ability to go out and buy a house or anything for that matter?
100%. And I know for a fact, I'm not the only one. There's so many of my college constituents that are affected by this very same issue. And I've been out of college for almost 15 years now. And a lot of my friends that I went to school with, they are facing the same exact issue where that struggle is real in order to really move forward.
Absolutely.
Because college, and of course, that's a big conversation around college debt. But yeah, it's affecting all of us right now.
Well, the reason why I ask you those things is because when you asked me the question about workforce development, wouldn't it be great if we figured out that first and foremost, not everybody wants or needs to go to college?
Agreed.
And if we have a situation to where right now in 2023, trade workers are making more than professionals, maybe, just maybe, we ought to have more options available to our high schoolers to certification programs.
Agreed.
Maybe, just maybe, that workforce development conversation might be able to include, some of, our unions who are looking to bring these kids into an apprenticeship program. And maybe, just maybe, we're missing the mark because we're not having conversations that put people in the best position to be able to support their hard working selves, be it families, be it young people who don't have families. There's a thing now called an extended adolescence, and it's been going on for probably well over a decade, where you're seeing that children are having to live at home with their parents until age 26.
Ooh.
Ouch. So young people are not even able to live independently anymore. There's something wrong with that. And if we don't have people who come to the table prepared to have this conversation that you and I are having, nothing changes.
Do you think the conversation is more difficult because of the lack of bipartisanship? Or how is that whole idea around reaching across the aisle? How does that affect making the decisions for the people that are facing these issues every single day?
Partisanship is a very ugly thing. I hate it. I detest it. Most people know that, I have been trying to get people to understand that when we approach the business of politics, we have got to start looking beyond partisanship. We've got to learn how to vote our values and not our party affiliation. I was very blessed growing up because my parents taught me very early on that you had to do your homework and be educated about what a candidate stood for, so that when you went inside of the booth, you were not obligated to vote your party affiliation.
Straight ticket.
So, that's right. And so I learned very early to play tic-tac-toe with my ballot. And Dad would tell us, and I trust and leaned on my parents, and it's a sin and a shame that more parents are not able to have, that too many people are trying to just make it every day. So by the time you get home and manage to get through the grind, who has even time to sit down at the dinner table together anymore and have a conversation? Our kids are parked in front of whatever devices they have. And it seems like the art of conversation has gone away, but I digress. We have to have the ability to get beyond partisanship, because you're right. There's too much that's getting lost in the sidelines of divisive party rhetoric. When we are stuck arguing over things that are going on in our nation, I think sometimes that's intentional. It keeps us from having to do the right thing sometimes as politicians if people are distracted by, all of these non-issue related things. And I'm not suggesting that what's going on in our country should be minimized by any stretch of the imagination, because it's very important that we have a dysfunctional Congress right now, because, we need to get a budget passed. I was a federal employee, and that is hurting folks tremendously, if our government shuts down. So, I understand what that means, because I remember being anxious, wondering if the budget was going to be passed as a federal employee or whether I was
real quick. And I don't want to miss that. People don't even know what a government shutdown is. Real quick, before you go to your next point, what is a government shutdown?
So when we don't have an active budget and we are continuing on a continuing resolution, then what that does is it basically gives an extension to the prior year's budget. And it allows for people to continue operating. But for an agency like mine that I worked for vets, then that means that, guess what? I don't get a paycheck, and the government shuts down. So all government offices that are needing for that budget to be passed for them to operate and pay their people, that means that it just ceases to function. And just imagine the devastation across our country if that happens. Shame on us for allowing partisanship to get in the way of that. And if we don't have people who are like me, who understand, and maybe, just maybe, I'm not going to throw no stones at anybody, but maybe, just maybe, by having 10 children and the chaos going on under my roof and having to constantly, mitigate all of those arguments that were going on to find, you know, some sort of common ground, even within my own house, you know, that's a necessary skill set. And I'm not calling anybody childish. So let's not get it twisted. I don't want to have anybody said she made a correlation that, you know, we were just a bunch of kicking and screaming kids in the house. But, you know, it is what it is. And that's what it gives the impression of, is that, you know, we're having tantrums around the board that are hurting people. And if we can't find a voice of reason in that conversation to say, hey, let's find the solution. Let's direct our energy where it could make the most benefit and get past some of these things. I'm not a huge fan of some of these things that get bundled, Malcolm. I don't think that it's fair for, you know, things that are important, that are going through, that need those votes, for those to have, you know, riders put on top of them that says, well, if I play ball with you today, I need you to play ball over here. We should be able to take each issue, deal with that issue, and move on to the next without there have to being a series of hurtful trade-offs. So, you know, I'm not a huge fan of that either. So, you know, I think we just really need to do better. The partisan stuff is hurting us.
So I want you to take another step back, right? When we talked about, I know in our conversation, you talked about just the simple awareness of what it is that you needed in order to push your small business forward. Just that one thing, just the awareness. And you had to dig for this information in order for you to be able to get some of the contracts and move forward with your business the way that you wanted to, right? Why is there such a lack of awareness here in Delaware? And I know it goes beyond Delaware, but in order for us to, you know, check off that box, we just have to be aware of the opportunities that are presented to us in order for us to check that box. Why are we not aware, and where do we need to go in order to figure out that type of information so we could begin to move forward with our businesses in a certain capacity?
Well, I can share my story briefly. When I decided that I wanted to go into business for myself, I began at a vantage point of, I'm a veteran. And because I was working for, the Department of Labor, and was aware of the resources, I said, well, I know that I should be able to go to this agency and that agency and be able to get what I need from each of them to get my start. And so when I started out on that journey, to my utter shock and amazement, I couldn't get the same answer from any two of then probably over 200 agencies that were designed to put resources in the hands of people who wanted to become entrepreneurs. And so, having sat in some roundtable discussions of what do small businesses need, you would be shocked and amazed to know that I'm thinking that it was probably maybe 6 or 7 years ago when I was sitting inside of a room full of people who were having that conversation. I was one of maybe 20 or 30 people in that room. There was probably maybe 2 small business owners. So we had stakeholders and community partners that were there to talk about people like me. But there were no people like me in the room to say, I need X, Y, and Z. So that was question number 1. Why aren't we doing more to reach people where they can come in and communicate their needs? So that's one thing. My second question was, when I was out perusing whoever was out there for access to resources, I was not getting the same set of information. So there's a lot of misinformation that's out there. So that's problem number 2. 3, even when you get to the right information, why is it so hard for me to be able to access the resource? I'm going to tell you that it took the pandemic for someone like me to be able to get funded with an SBA loan. That application process, if you could get through, I want to say one of the applications was in excess of 40 pages long.
Woo.
Yes.
Woo.
So if you have the wherewithal to even get to the right resource, when you get there, the barrier to being able to successfully gain access to resources is frustrating. So most people just give up on their dream, not because their dream wasn't viable, but because they either couldn't find the right resource, or when they found it, it was so overwhelming they couldn't navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds a lot like, I know you've heard the stories of people who apply for like Social Security disability, and they go in and they fill out the application and it gets kicked back and says denied. You know, some people give up at that point.
Yes, they do.
And it's the same scenario in business. There's so many people that give up. So currently, I actually am an advisor for the Launcher program. And that's a great program that connects people who are looking to launch their businesses. It's a 12-week course. They go through. Neighborhood Partners is the one who oversees that program. You go through. You get all of the pieces of what it takes to start a business, or if you're already in business, what it takes to access working capital and all of that. There are a number of touch points, but when I say, I'm a part of that program, people sometimes are scratching their heads like, well, what is that?
They didn't even know that it existed. They
don't know it exists. So my thing is, if you really want people to not only know about resources, but be able to access them, you've got to put them in plain sight. How hard is that? You and I are sitting here having a conversation. You have a podcast. Mm-hmm. How about all of these social media touch points where if you really wanted a demographic to access those, how about we start advertising where people are? It's very simple. It's very simple. And again, I can't hit this point home enough. When you have people who have firsthand knowledge and experience on these shortcomings, those are the people that you want to have in these elected offices to be able to move the needle. Because at the end of the day, people's bottom lines are not being changed by what we have going on right now.
Mm-hmm. 100% agreed. And I'm glad that you're talking in depth, because you actually have the experience, because you've been through these things. So you could talk in depth about the actual processes that you need to go through in order to acquire the things that you need to run your business, right? You talked about veterans, and I know you have done a phenomenal work with the veterans. You've been doing this for a long time. Speak about the importance of your work with the vets and why that's so important to somebody who's running for the particular office that you're running for.
Well, and this is an emotional conversation for me. And with it being, veterans events and Veterans Days coming up, Veterans Day coming up this month, and all of the different ceremonies that you see, our politicians show up, and they're quick to put their arm around a veteran, or they might even serve on a committee that's not really moving the needle for veterans. I'm highly critical about this because I can be. I have lived the nightmare of our veteran administration. My father, God rest his soul, we lost him in 2019, and he was a Vietnam veteran. He had all of the cancers associated with his exposure to Agent Orange, and the last 6 months of his life, Malcolm, I spent in a locked-horn battle with the Veterans Administration, trying to get him something as simple as aid and attendance. My mother is a retired RN. She is maybe 105 pounds soaking wet. And, for a a 77-year-old woman to be expected to turn her husband over, to give him a bath, change his undergarments. It was too much. And if you are not in a financial position, and this is not just something that's unique to veterans, it's with our aging population as a whole. As a whole. And I had a conversation with someone today who is a senior, and he said, you know, the same thing. He has worries and concerns about how he will be treated as a aging person inside, you know, of Delaware, on Delaware soil. So, you know, these are things that our aging population are faced with, and particularly within the veteran community, I see where VA could be doing a much better job. And depending on who you are, you might get varying opinions. Some people I've spoken to in this state have said, I get the greatest care ever from VA, but it's not the standard. Because there are people who tell me it's been an epic nightmare. And I've seen that. My father died without his dignity at the hands of a very broken VA system. You can't allow that to continue happening. So when I'm in Washington, D.C., I will never allow our veterans to be an afterthought. You know, I just got finished telling you that, you know, I have a son that's 21 years old that has 6 bad discs in his back because he sustained an injury on deployment. He needs a voice. And there are men and women across this great nation who are like him that need a voice. You know, we've got this situation right now where, you know, we have a thing going on inside of DC where people's promotions are being held up. That's in a military capacity. And I'm sorry, but that person that's holding it up never served a day in his life. And makes comparisons to his civilian experiences. Well, pardon me, you don't get to make that type of comparison because I put my name on the dotted line that was payable up into my life. Shame on us. Will never happen under my watch. Never.
I want you to go a little deeper into the state of veteran affairs, because I know homelessness is a huge issue. I know the ability to upskill and help them to get jobs. I know we're having this conversation around workforce development, and they're also talking about the mental health around veterans who previously served and now they're not getting the support that they need. With you potentially being in office, what would you do to change some of this narrative? Because I know Delaware has facing like a crazy housing crisis. What are some of the things that you would implement in order to, you know, kind of mitigate some of these issues that veterans are facing right now?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the valuable point around mental health. I have a brother, and he has struggled with mental illness for much of his adult life. And in places like Delaware, we have had conversations around, and I don't think it's something that's just necessarily unique to Delaware. You know, when states have had liability issues around long-term care facilities, what has happened is a very sad state of affairs where we have a lot of mentally ill people, veterans and civilians, that are homeless and in our streets, and we can't do anything for them because they have their rights as well. And so because the conversation has kind of moved around the fact that family members who are concerned can no longer say, I have a person who's struggling with this particular mental illness and needs a long-term care. The reality is those people have to find legal and criminal issues going on to get them in a situation to where they can be put in long-term care facilities. They have to actually break the law in some instances repeatedly and be on a diversion track in the court systems that will allow for some of those compassionate options. And it came about, my understanding was because there was a certain amount of abuse that was going on in these long-term care facilities. And so what's happened is people are having to be managed in the community with community resources that are not providing enough wraparound services for people who are not capable of independent living. So in my particular situation, my family was trying to deal with my brother, and we were doing our best to do what we could do to keep him in our homes. But it got to the point to where he was so mentally unstable that he was a danger and a threat, not only to himself, but to my parents and myself and my children. So for individuals like him, he's stuck in that space where they haven't done enough criminally to be put in a long-term care facility. Some of them end up in jail because they're doing things out in the community that doesn't get them into the court where they need to be. And so because we don't have people putting together the resources, Malcolm.
What's up, y'all? It's your boy Malcolm Locks everywhere. You guys know the vibes. Listen, yes, in the middle of the podcast, I need you guys to go to my Twitch channel and show me some love. Twitch.tv/Malcolm Locks. I will greatly appreciate if you guys could follow me right over there. If you play any type of video games, Fortnite, Call of Duty, Madden, any type of video games, I need you guys to go shoot me a follow right now. Twitch.tv/Malcolm Locks. Yes, I stopped and I'm shooting my own commercial in the middle of my own podcast, but I need you guys to go shoot me a follow right over at Twitch. Once again, it's your boy Malcolm Locks everywhere. Greatly appreciate y'all.
That group of people are lost out in the streets and they're not getting the help that they deserve. So I actually asked some of the people who are in mental health, what can we do about this problem? It has to come from a place where that question can be answered by addressing the liability issues around long-term care. Got to have it though, because there's too many people that are dealing with mental illness. And I know you've seen them. They walk around the streets. They're talking as though there's 1,000 people around them. And there's nobody that they're talking to.
And God forbid drugs is in the midst of all of this as well, because Delaware is in the midst of a ridiculous opioid crisis right now. So God forbid that's a part of the situation too. So
absolutely, there's a lot of contributing factors is what I'm trying to get to. That until you really do the deep dive, and I'm sorry, I'm tired of talking about a thing. We may need to pull the trigger and execute a plan and go back and tweak whatever it is that we need to tweak. But we have to get these people off of the streets, particularly those that are suffering with mental health issues. We've got to figure it out. And maybe we, for every step forward, we go two steps backwards. But at least, we're trying some different things. I've seen far too long people are talking about this, but they're not doing anything. That's my biggest problem. And I don't believe in talking a thing to death. I believe in action.
Miss Hall is ready to take some action out here, which is why she's running for her position. And we had such a good conversation when we spoke the other week, and you really touched upon your family. You really touched upon, you have 10 kids and they all went through the public school education here in Delaware. Talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about the public education sector here in Delaware. What are some of the things that you want to do to really make a big reform here in Delaware? Because I know there are people trying to push the needle forward. What are the issues that you see, and with you being potentially stepping into this role, what do you want to do to push the needle forward?
Well, we have an education crisis here, Malcolm. There's no doubt about it. When you look at the fact that we are spending top dollar among schools across the nation per child, we're achieving, in some instances, 46th, in some instances, 48th. We are at the bottom of all of the states in the nation for our outcomes. And it's incomprehensible how 4 out of 10 children are on reading level. It's even more incomprehensible that 3 out of 10 are on math level. And when you start looking at communities of color, that drops to even less. So I've been asking that question to people who would be considered experts in what's the fix, what are the constraints. Some of the things that we've talked about have a lot to do with, number one, there's no one size fits all solution.
Agreed.
So Delaware, for instance, we have 3 very unique characteristic counties. And so in Newcastle, you have a lot of different options that are not available to Kent or Sussex. And so one of the things that I want to see happen is for us to figure out what these constraints are. The resources and time are typically the constraints. We have X amount of dollars to do whatever it is we're going to do. And we have a short period of time that we need to execute on that. So there are a lot of different competing ideas of how we make that happen. And I would like for us to figure out what positions our parents to be able to make the best education choice for their particular situation. If that means they need to go to a school that's not in their home district, we should make that happen. If that means that we no longer want to participate in a public education system, that needs to happen. There's no one size fits all. But I think that when the end game goal is to give our parents what they need to get their children educated properly, we win all the way around the board. I don't know about you, but I want this next generation to be well educated, because those are our future leaders. Those are the people who are going to be taking care of you and I in about another 20, 30 years. How about that cashier that can't even count back your change to you right now? And I know you've seen them. If you give them, if your bill comes up to, 96 cents at the end of whatever it is, and you have cash and you give them 101 and they made the mistake of putting in a whole dollar, they can't figure out that they could just give you a nickel and be done with it. That's a sad thing. I know I've even seen some of my own children, in 5th or 6th grade, that they didn't get taught like rote memorization skills. I had to have my times tables, memorized by the time I was in 3rd grade. And we won't even talk about that there's a generation out there that cannot write in cursive.
Oh man, cursive is it's going to be a lost art.
Yes.
It's going to be a lost art.
But you see what I'm talking about. That is where, in my mind, the rubber really meets the road, is that we're missing the mark on some fundamental things, Malcolm. Shame on us.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about education these past couple of months, and it's actually just like you said, Delaware. We're just, you know, these are the facts. We're just at the lowest of the low, and I know a lot of people are talking about funding. The way how the schools are funded is such a serious issue, and also we talk a lot about the teacher shortage. Could you talk a little bit about the teacher shortage and what Delaware could potentially do in your position, how we could fight the teacher shortage? What are some of the things that we might be able to do with the teacher shortage?
I think that that's not just something that is peculiar to Delaware. I think
Right, I agree.
There are states across the nation that are having a hard time getting teachers to stay. And can I just be honest and just say that it doesn't look like an enticing proposition. And if I wanted to attract people to become teachers, if I wanted to attract great applicants, then we need to make that something that is attractive in and of itself. How do we get quality teachers to come on board? We've got a generation of children, and mine are no exception. I have seen the pendulum swing, from one side of that conversation to the other. And I'm not advocating any of the things that necessarily I had when I was going through, but I laugh with folks and I tell people, I said, the Board of Correction was a paddle that hung on my principal's wall when I was in school. We've got these kids that are coming inside of the schools and they are just giving the business to these teachers. I mean, they're rude, they're disrespectful. Teachers don't have control over their classrooms.
And that leads to less teaching time.
Yes. Yes. Which, again, kind of circles back to my original position on being able to equip parents with the best opportunities to take their child where they see that they can, get a good educational outcome for their kids. And sometimes being able to just kind of shift things around in a way that it works better for you yields better outcomes. But, for the teachers that are in these classrooms, they certainly need the supports that they're not getting to get our kids in a position to well educate them. So, we've got classrooms where the kids are achieving up here, and then we have the ones that we're dragging across, the finish line. The ones who are struggling in the classroom sometimes can be a distraction from, the ones that are trying to learn. It's just a mess inside of these classrooms. So, Malcolm, I wish that I could sit and I could say that, again, there was a one size fits all fix here. There really is not. But I know that I would be doing whatever I could to give our parents what they need, to give our teachers what they need, so that we can invest in our next generation of children before we lose another one. We have to. So
100%.
Again, we have to continue to find an action plan and work it. That means we got to go back and tweak it and get it right, or maybe we scrap it and go back, to the beginning. We have to do something. This is not something we can continue to perpetuate, one failed set of policies after the next. We got to do something.
Agree. So let's go ahead. I got a couple questions to wrap this thing up and bring it all together, right? So where do you see Delaware in the next 10 years? How do you envision your role in that future? And what are some of the success? What are some of the measures of success that you want to see for yourself if elected?
Well, quite honestly, if we don't start getting more people like me inside of our government structure at every level, I don't see us moving the needle one iota. I made a statement earlier that we've not seen any economic growth in 3 decades. Yeah, that comes from failed leadership. I'm just going to call it what it is. We can't continue doing the same things over and over and expect a different result. That is the definition of insanity, and so until we part from that way of thinking, we're going to continue to see the results that we have seen historically over the last several decades here. My role in all of that is to shift the narrative vastly. I know that there are other people that are out there like me who are political outsiders that would like to give the voters across this great nation options to do something different, to bring fresh ideas to this conversation. I think it's going to actually take some outside of the box thinkers to get that done. And I think people like me are exactly the balm that Gilead needs right now to soothe, our aching soul here in this country.
What type of message do you want to leave with the voters of this great state of Delaware?
Do your homework on your candidates. Don't be put inside one of those boxes that says, just because my party affiliation is Democrat, Republican, Independent, that you are stuck looking for a Democrat, a Republican, or an Independent. It's your responsibility and obligation to be an informed voter. Go into that voting booth knowledgeable about where people stand on your issues, and don't be afraid to play tic-tac-toe with your ballot. You are able to, and I think that once you become educated that you can vote across the ballot, that's where we win. Don't just be happy going in to get your I voted sticker and have no clue who you just voted for. You got to be knowledgeable. So that definitely is something that I want to leave with your audience, is to make sure that they understand exactly where these candidates stand on their issues and go in the booth informed.
Man, you gave the people a mouthful, and I'm glad, because state and local elections are so critical to our everyday lives, and I'm glad that you gave me a little bit of your time, because I know you busy. So I do appreciate you for that. So
yeah, I'm
real
sure
quick,
you could hear my device.
Oh yeah, yep. So because that's how you know it's time. That's how you know it's time. How do people get in contact with you? I know you said something to me the other day, like, oh, your number has been the same for a long time. Like, if you call me, you could call me. So what do you how do people get in contact with you?
Absolutely.
Well, and where do they follow you at?
Of course, you can follow me on all my social media. If you put in Donyale Hall inside your search engine, it is going to point you to all of those various places. My website, which is DonyaleForDelaware.com, and you can find my phone number. You can find all my social media sites. My number has been the same for 18 years, Malcolm. So, and I've never masked it for the sake of any political campaign at all. And people are always happy when they find that number and they call it, and I pick up my phone and say, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, Donyale speaking. So you will get me. You're welcome to text me. You're welcome to call me. You're welcome to email me. I will get back to you. So that is my commitment and my promise to the people, is that I will always remain engaged and available and accessible.
Thank you, Ms. Donyale Hall. I appreciate you so much for giving me your time. And to everybody who's going to watch this podcast, this is the Principal Protocol with your boy Malcolm Locks everywhere. You guys can follow me, Malcolm Locks, and I'm everywhere except LinkedIn, Malcolm Coley on LinkedIn. So yeah, thank you so much once again for giving me some of your time. And I hope that people take this information, run with it, do their own research, and we might see you as one of our next elected officials in 2024.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Malcolm.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being a part. And that is it.